Here we go. I'm not going to edit out the beginning. I never do. All right, so here we go. Probably should be okay. Oh my God. We're both very long legged. What's good, y'all? Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the free hour. It's your boy Trevor Turner. And we're here today with a very special version of the free hour ABCs. Got my brother with me, Alex Turner. I'm going to let him introduce himself to y'all in a second. But first, I want to tell you guys what we're talking about. We're talking about the letter S. So last week we talked about relationships and really got deep into that. So I really want to go ahead and do the same thing on self-image, self-confidence, self-esteem. This concept that I think a lot of us, for some reason, we try to pull from outside. We try to pull it from outside experiences, outside circumstances. We try to pull it from validation of the way that other people see us. Even try to pull it from social media. And the reason I wanted to talk to my brother about this, obviously not just because I'm here in Texas, but because it'd be perfect for him. So yeah, go ahead and introduce yourself real quick.
All right. Hey, so I'm Alex Turner, 37 years old. I'm a captain in the Army, currently working as a PA here in Texas, and I've been in the military for about 15 years now. Um, Two children, currently married, and just happy to be here.
All right, great. So obviously, just for off top, if you're brand new to my channel, you may not have noticed this, and I'll kind of go into it a little bit more. If you've been watching the channel, if you've been with me, or if you're one of my friends who I showed to the channel, you'll immediately notice the differences, right? Not just physically, not just the way we look. Obviously, we're both mixed. Both have the same mother and father. We sound exactly the same. That's not me doing a voiceover whenever he's talking. That's not him doing a voiceover whenever I'm talking. We are the same thing, and we were raised the same. We were raised by the same people, raised in the same environments, but went like this. I obviously went the route that I went to prison, got into addiction, got into criminal lifestyles, got into gang membership, gang, got into gang banging, all that shit. Yeah, gang membership. And he went into the military. He's been in it for a very long time. He has two beautiful children, and you know, our lives diverged, and our lives diverged, I think, because of what it is that we're going to be talking about. So, basically, how would you define like the concept of self?
Mm. Obviously, that's a pretty deep question, but I think keeping it superficial when we talk about just the concept of self is probably, in my view, the kind of thoughts, beliefs, the rules you have just about who you are as a person, what's important to you, your past experiences, just all that related into the type of person you are existing. So, like self just being who I am.
Okay, so now to kind of go a little bit deeper into it, because when I looked at self before, up until very recently, I looked at self as always a reflection of how other people view me.
Mm.
So knowing that that's not anything to do with what self actually is anymore, right? It no longer comes from validation. It no longer comes from how other people view your accomplishments or the things that you've done. And even when we say like, hey, introduce yourself, and you say all these things that you've done, that isn't necessarily a reflection of you, of self, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how would you separate self from how other people view you?
Hmm. So I think, when you look at accomplishments and how other people view you, they themselves are looking at you through the lens of their own experiences and their own perspective. So, I mean, we talk about lots of things that could change how people view you, your biases, stereotypes, racism, things of that nature. So, again, divorcing your own view of yourself from other people's either approval, disapproval, or beliefs about you, because they can be flawed. They can be various things that don't really help us when we're kind of trying to figure out who we are, where we're going, and why. Um, yeah, I think that's kind of how I'd wrap it up.
Okay, so let's do this just because, we know that, um, just because we've been, like I said before, we were in the same environments, the same backgrounds. We went through the same things. We went into the same places. Not necessarily around the same exact people, but the same types of people were in our lives, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, how did you personally, and I know that you mentioned this divorcing self from what other people, the lenses that other people viewed you through.
Mm-hmm.
So, what were some of the ways you did it? When do you think you were able to start actually doing it? And obviously, maybe give a little bit of the benefits, not in how your life went, but in how it helped your mindset,
Mm-hmm.
helped the way that you feel about yourself.
Yeah, so I guess kind of a long-winded, long-winding story is about to follow. But when I was in high school, I kind of just thought that the next step for me would just be going to college, kind of doing what everybody else was doing, things of that nature. And I saw the people around me, my close friend group. Some did, some didn't. Some, aren't with us anymore. Some are drug addicts and things like that. But I'd say that growing up, I had kind of an inflated sense of self, but probably because I felt like I had a lot to prove. And I didn't really know how exactly I was going to do those things. I got into school because I thought it was the right thing to do, and I had no passion for what I was doing. I had no purpose or direction because, again, it wasn't really coming from me. It was coming from, I wanted external validation or external things like money, career status. Um, so eventually, in my senior year of college, I dropped out, and then that's when I joined the military. And I can't say I did it for incredibly like altruistic reasons. I did it again because I wasn't feeling fulfilled in what I was doing, and I had this need or this drive to show everyone.
And they were giving out charges back then too, right?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true too. So, but I wanted to like show everybody that I was special. I could do things. And I went through a pretty rough breakup at that time too that kind of contributed to that. But so when I joined the military, I joined with a special forces contract, and I was lucky enough to make it through the program and become a Green Beret, which was obviously a crowning achievement for me for a while, but still. I didn't necessarily have that same level of passion that even some of my peers there did. I wanted to be this thing because I wanted other people to treat me the way I felt like I should be treated, or to look at me the way I wanted to be treated. It wasn't until probably a few years of doing that job and a couple of deployments, a couple of combat deployments, where I think that I could mature and grow, and then lean back on some of the things that I've accomplished to find pride in myself, and then be able to kind of be like, yeah, I don't really have to look for that external validation because I've got these reference points that, this accumulation of things that's helped me to kind of be in line with the person that I'd like to become. And looking back on those, it gave me a lot of faith in myself, and I could kind of be like, okay, I don't need to do X, Y, and Z, or I don't feel the need to prove this or that to other people. And it's a work in progress. So if I were to say that I've got that all figured out, that would be a lie.
It'd be some bullshit.
Yeah. But benefits wise, I mean, I think it helps your mental health most of all. Because again, I'm not the type of person who for better or worse, I don't feel the need to get that external validation, posting pictures on like Instagram, or flashing things or promoting this false lifestyle. And then when I meet people, I can kind of connect with them on a more personal basis, or just choose to be introverted like I think I naturally am, without feeling incredibly self-conscious, because I'm staying true to what I think is right, and then I'm not trying to overcome all of this with boisterousness or boasting and things like that. And I think it's calming. I think it helps you put things that you want into perspective. And then I think with that focus, it helps you kind of, understand what's important. And then when you've got a good map, a good lay of the land, you can focus and really achieve those goals, and find what makes you happy.
So two things real quick. So I want to touch basically on the boisterousness of it, because I think remembering me as a teenager, right before all the bullshit, very shy, introverted type person, but always wanted to prove myself to other people. Always wanted to be the quote unquote life of the party.
Mm-hmm.
Always wanting to have the friends that I probably didn't need, probably shouldn't have even been pursuing, but because I was carrying this image of what I should have been based upon the things that I was seeing. And even though we didn't really have, social media and all that stuff back
Mm-hmm.
then, you still kind of saw all this stuff and you were like, that's how people our age are supposed to be. And so the boisterousness of it, trying to act like you're something that you're not for that external validation, is definitely something that I fell into. Um, Alcohol, drugs, other things of that nature, trying to prove myself. And that started for me really early. Um, and then also, with the external validation of obviously I went a different route, but it was the core of it was the same
Mm-hmm.
because I was trying to prove to other people that I could be this person, or I could be that, or I could do those things, or I could be that person that could be, quote unquote, relied upon to do the dirty work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just like you, I didn't really have the passion for it. I didn't have my heart in it, but I was so invested
Yeah.
in trying to be that for other people, forgetting what I needed to be for me and what I wanted, even kind of throwing that stuff to the wayside. Never really even finding my own purpose, never finding myself, because yourself is always going to be a reflection to me. Yourself is always going to be a reflection of your purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not you've achieved it, whether or not you've actually accomplished, it's always a reflection of that. So even if you've just taken that step towards it, it is a reflection of that, and that's something that you can use to prop yourself up with. Because for me, I can't necessarily always lean on my own accomplishments,
Mm-hmm.
right? But one of the things I can do is that I can say that, like I did take myself down pretty far.
Mm-hmm.
And because I was able to do that, and I take away the blame or the responsibility from other people and put it all back in here, all back on self, all back on my own actions, that gives me the power to go back up. And I think that that's something that on both sides of the spectrum when it comes to self, I think that a lot of people can kind of just say, hey, like the things that we take for granted, because I never graduated, I didn't finish high school, right? But you did.
Mm-hmm.
But I got my GED. There's people out there who don't have a GED.
Yeah.
That's something you can lean back on. I was able to, do what I did and get the whatever you want to call it in the thing that I was in, and that's taking myself down. Like I did that though, so
Mm-hmm.
that means that I can go the other way. Just like how you were saying, like with the special forces thing, you did that.
Mm-hmm.
Even getting to being the senior in college, like that is something that you could have leaned upon. And then, I think that with a lot of people, just because we've walked in a certain direction or we've gone in a certain way that isn't the exact way that we've wanted to go, we think that every step was a waste.
Yeah.
And the thing is, we can say that like, hey, I went the wrong direction, but I went pretty damn far. So that means that I could, just as far as I went doing this, I can go the other way.
Mm-hmm.
Or even I can say that this might be closer to this. This direction could take longer than even going from here to it. So there are links to being able to change and being able to start looking at self in a new light to where you can take yourself to a new place. And I think that that's a real good example of it. Just knowing that with both sides of the spectrum, because even people who do, positive things, they can do it for the wrong reasons.
Mm-hmm.
When they do it for validation,
Yeah.
when they do it because other people think or they want to prove something to somebody. Because there was this thing when you look at your sources of motivation. When you say that your source of motivation, like say for me, you know, I get my money or whatever. I want to do it so that my family never has to work again, or
Mm-hmm.
this, that, whatever. Well, what happens when I get that point? That means that I stop working. What happens when I prove to them that I was able to do this contract? Does that mean that I stop working on
Mm-hmm.
myself? And I just wanted to comment on that one.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Is that you talk about purpose being a big factor of who you are, because I think when you take a look at a person's purpose, you then get insight into their values, because our purpose, that's our path, that's the end goal, and that shows us as a person what's important to us. If my purpose, I want to become the world champion and I want people to love me, it's like you're showing us your values, what you value. I value fans, money, fame, things like that. Now, you get other people, obviously, on the same token, I want to be the best for the purpose of being the best and like perfection and the love of the sport. And because if I'm going to do something, I do it right. That's like what do you value? It's not that you value the fame and the money or even the success. It's that you value the work, or you value uh, the journey, and then that may not have a destination because you get better and better and better. But I think like you said, people can do great things for bad reasons, but it's like, what's the purpose? It's I think it's an important thing to lean on for self inventory.
Okay, cool. So we've talked about self. We've gone real deep into self. So let's talk a little bit about development of the self concept. Now that we've kind of talked about and touched on what self means, let's dive into the hard shit, right? Let's talk about self image. Let's talk about self esteem. Let's talk about self confidence. And let's go from when you were at that point, you know, coming out of high school,
Mm-hmm.
going through what you was going through in college and doing all your stuff. Where would you say your self esteem was at? And you can even go back
Mm-hmm.
further if you want to, just to kind of touch on, because there's a certain place I want to go with this, because I notice now that your self esteem and your self image is kind of like up here.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that before I went away for my first time, and then we kind of lost touch for a long time after that, like I know that not only my self esteem and self image was really low, but yours was kind of at the same point.
Mm-hmm.
So let's kind of talk about like, let's dive into our lows, mids, highs, how we got there, what we did to get there, and how they are a reflection of not of the things that we did on our own work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So starting off, I mean, a low point. Obviously, like I've had a few low points in my life in terms of self esteem, self image, self confidence, and things of that nature. But kind of just a broad overview of the spectrum, I guess. Starting in like early high school years. Good number of friends, playing some sports. Everything was going decently well, but I think that's a being a young preteen, then early teenage male, unless you have somebody in your corner, like just like really helping you out, I think that is a hard time for the self, because you're learning who you are, you're learning what you like, you're learning what you're good at. And it's a time when you're thrown into an environment that can be pretty unforgiving, and that could be, like your friend group, high school, clubs. I mean, just like the neighborhood, things like that. And so that's that point in time where you are learning what values, are part of your group identity. And to take it kind of back to like the medical field, we take a look at the stages of development with children into teens into adults, and as people become teenagers and start getting older, they start to move away from the family as a primary focus into more the peer group, or being a part of the social structure at large, the group structure. And the groups, people will move around until they kind of settle into something that they settle into, but they're looking at those and they're seeing like, okay, what's important to these people? And when you put those things on a pedestal and you're wanting, or you aren't meeting those things, it can cause, some issues with self-esteem. I think that just the basics that I feel like everybody could relate with is like, you don't have to be in a specific area or anything like that, but if you're, going through puberty, everybody's getting girlfriends, and then, you're awkward around girls, that's going to decrease your self-esteem because it's important and you're not good at it. And then you want to, be successful in the things that your friends find success in, or that media tells you success. So like sports. And if you're kind of a nerdy kid growing up and you're not good at the things you want to be good at, that's going to lower your self-esteem. So, those early years, eighth, seventh, eighth grade, going into ninth grade, that's when I say I'd start like going on the upstroke, because I started to move into becoming the person that I thought I should be in terms of the people around me and what I thought success kind of looked like. But, with time and age and wisdom comes perspective. And I think, most people would agree that those things that you think are important in ninth, 10th grade end up being, ridiculous as you get older. Like I had misplaced values, and there's a lot that, I would have replaced and would have fit my natural, strengths. But there were things that I thought was important, and I had a gulf in between where I was and where I wanted to be. So
See,
it really it hit me down. And then also, I mean, when you talk about family issues too, I think that is a portion of, self image, self consciousness. It's like being part of a team and going through family issues, travel, moving, hospital stays, things of that nature. I think you start to see that when you're developing your identity, like, who am I? Well, who's my family? And then you have people in your family doing certain things, and you start to bring that in as your part of your identity. And that can be hard as a child too.
so one of the things, um, yeah, definitely the family thing, because I think for a long time I kind of internalized the stuff that was going on, with them, moms and
Mm-hmm.
pops and stuff. And I think one of the reasons I was actually able to have hope though was because I was internalizing the stuff that you had going on. Because when it goes back to what you were saying about having somebody in your corner, growing up, even though the family unit was together physically,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that was something that was probably pretty lacking in our department. Because when you say like the stuff that the other people are around you are getting good at, and you're not good at those things, and you have no one there to point out the stuff that you are good at and
Mm-hmm.
how important that stuff is, not only for you but for other people, for the world, like what you can do with those things, and you have literally nobody there congratulating you on those things, whether it be like uh, friends, girlfriends, romances, whatever the case, family, you don't have none of that. That's when you start to really just like desperately grab for anything
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to values, how you talked about misplaced values, because like how you said, everybody's getting good at talking to girls, everybody's getting girlfriends and stuff. And like, I didn't get good at that until like 2 years ago.
Mm. Yeah, I'm still waiting.
Yeah.
So,
So, I mean,
maybe 2 years from now.
maybe 2 years from now, but it's like, I didn't get like not socially awkward until very recently.
Mm.
I was always very socially awkward. And the only thing that got me to not be socially awkward was finally accepting the fact that I'm just not that guy. And once I did that and I stopped giving a shit, that's when I can actually talk to people because I don't give a fuck what they think about me.
Mm-hmm.
But that didn't happen the same time that it happened for everybody else. And then also how you said about being the nerdy kid or whatever. Like I liked anime. I liked. I was a band, played in a band. I
Mm-hmm.
was this. I didn't play a lot of sports like that. I mean, I was athletic and everything, but I didn't. Like in middle school and everything, I didn't get into that stuff. I was too busy doing this other stuff, this nerdy stuff, this stuff that the people that I finally like, who finally accepted having me around,
Mm-hmm.
didn't consider positives, didn't consider success. So now I'm trying to fit in, like how you said, trying to fit into what their view of being a man was, or being this, or being cool, or whatever the case. Like, this is what you're supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so, unfortunately, the friend group that I was with, this is just what they did. And I went along with it. And I went along with it to the fullest because I was like, okay, I know that myself, who I am, has never been accepted. Never by family members, never by anything, right? So I'm going to be accepted. And I'm going to overwrite everything about me with all of this other shit, all of this veneer, or whatever the case you want, whatever you want to call it. And it, it really just came from not having anybody in your corner, because yeah, like that time in a man's life is extremely unforgiving.
Mm-hmm.
That's when you learn that really nobody cares about you. That's when you learn that nobody is going to be there to pick you up if you fall, unless you have somebody in your corner.
Yeah.
Like, you're supposed to be able to, like, if you fall and scrape your knee, no matter like if you're in high school or whatever the case, you're supposed to be able to go home and somebody's going to be there to be like, okay, I got you. I'm gonna help you through it. Now, what did we learn from that? What are you gonna do different? All this other stuff. But then they're laughing at school. They're laughing at you.
Mm-hmm.
They're making fun of you. They're calling you a loser. They're saying you're this, you're that. And then you get home and they're doing the same shit. And then on top of that, they're saying, "Get the fuck out of my face." Like I'm. And then it's like, damn. Okay, I have nobody. And during that time, it's a very, very hard time. So, like how you said you were on that upstroke, I think for me that time
Mm-hmm.
was definitely a downstroke, is because just because I abandoned myself, like how you said, putting it on the pedestal,
Mm-hmm.
putting their stuff on the pedestal, I did that and completely abandoned the things that I like. I mean, like, yeah, we there was some stuff that I had in common, like that I actually liked with some of those friends, like
Mm-hmm.
play video games. We go to the internet cafe in the land center
Yeah.
and play computer games and stuff like that. Or we watch anime and stuff. But and it felt cool because nobody made fun of us for watching anime, because we would hurt them. But then it's like it was still not my values to it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that is a very forgiving time. So now let's kind of talk about. Let's keep going further. Let's talk about further into the upstroke. Let's talk about where we went from there to develop self-image, self-esteem, self-confidence.
Yeah. So, I think as I started getting older and then, got into near graduating high school and then going into college, um, I think that the group of friends that I had was pretty solid, and I started to kind of at least get more secure in my identity and like kind of where I saw myself going. And I think it's a big distinction though that like looking back on it now, it wasn't authentic So it's like this, it is this veneer of self-confidence, or like even competence. Like I would kind of put it that way. Like I fit in and had friends and was doing the things that we like to do, that were cued as success. But again, like it's it wasn't it wasn't being true to, myself, which I was still developing. But as I was fitting in, and as I was doing the things that I felt I was supposed to do, I started just kind of being like, okay, just kind of going through life, still not, feeling like I'm on top of the world. I can do anything. I can, you know, be anything, because I just didn't have that sense of self developed yet. But as I was gaining competence in some things and receiving like little bits of external praise or validation, as that started and as that was coming, I did start to feel, a little bit more of something that I would consider like self confidence, but it's shallow. Like that level of self confidence blows, with the wind. It's like an actor, they're on top of the world when they're getting awards, but then if that's what it's tied to and it all goes away, who are they? So, as long as I was doing okay, or like I was with, a girlfriend, or I was meeting new people, or people were, enjoying being around me, as long as that was happening, I was feeling pretty good. But, as obviously a couple years later, it went the other way pretty drastically, which I'm sure we'll get into. But that's kind of like the upswing. Like things were going pretty well, and we were talking about like you internalize those external values from your group. I think it's important to note that like the group that I was in, the group that I started with, and I think it's a lot of it's by luck, but I think that group, their values happen to generally be productive and acceptable within like the social mores of like, the group of people. So like it's all about that group. So if all your friends are lawyers, and then you're doing what is valuable to them, it's very likely that, to like the world's accepted values, you're probably going to be looked at favorably. If all of your friends in your peer group are assassins, like you're probably going to be looked at unfavorably. So I think, in a lucky way, I was, in a group where those values kind of helped us out.
And that's definitely a good thing. That's definitely the difference. Just have to check that real quick. That's definitely the difference. So, yeah, when you say, I wouldn't say luck. I think it was kind of also a reflection of, you know, character also, because in a lot of ways, because we knew the same people.
Mm-hmm.
We knew a lot of the same people. So, especially coming from where we was living at, from our neighborhood and stuff, from our high school, I just, I'm not gonna say luck. I'm gonna say it was choice because, um, obviously with the differences with the high school thing, you continued with that group through high school and
Mm-hmm.
everything. I decided to continue with my group by getting kicked out of high school for a gang related battery. Um, and that was that. And I definitely continued with my group. Um, and I think for a lot of that time I was gone. I was just off doing my thing for a lot of that time period. Still trying to do what I was trying to do, still trying to fit into that group and still trying to be something
Mm-hmm.
else. And that's kind of where, addiction sparked, and that's where self esteem for me kind of bottomed out. When you say you had the veneer, I definitely had that veneer, but that veneer was something that didn't even have the wind didn't have to blow to knock it down. It just would just randomly, for no reason, every now and again, just decide to fall. And because it was so related to what other people thought. And when you're dealing with a bunch of people who are doing mind and mood altering substances, their thoughts are going to change like that, not
Mm-hmm.
without even the wind blowing. Their thoughts are changing. Their thoughts about you are changing. The way that they value you is changing. Whether so a lot of my value at that time was solely tied to what I did for them, as opposed to being solely tied to the things that I did in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So, like with your group, it was a thing like how you were saying, if the whole friend group is lawyers and you become a lawyer, like they're gonna look at it kind of weird, but like they're gonna look at it like that's par for the course. But if you become a paralegal, they're all gonna be like, well, what happened with you?
Mm-hmm.
And that has nothing to do with you doing anything for them. Our thing was like, oh, okay, so you went and did something on your own that doesn't benefit me
Mm-hmm.
directly. That still isn't an accomplishment that is considered in that equation, or it doesn't weigh or tip the scales. Like, oh, you went and put in some work. I didn't know that dude. I wasn't beefing with that dude. I didn't care about that dude. Or you went and did this and you got some money. Well, you didn't put any in my hand. It didn't get me high. It didn't put any clothes on my back, right? So that now I was scrambling for accomplishment and doing all of this shit. And half of it wasn't even getting recognized, right? And that was, I think, the difference with that friend group thing, and then but still trying to find that validation and trying to find the self image and self esteem, because I had firmly defined self at that point as I'm this. I'm from here. I'm doing this. I am about this, and I'm going to be that in that
Mm-hmm.
lifestyle. And my image and esteem was firmly and fully rooted in what they thought about my progress.
Mm-hmm.
And then the realization, the hindsight is 2020. Their view of my progress would have been like if I had brought 100,000 back and they didn't get as much of it, it would have been worth less than me
Yeah.
bringing back 2,000 and splitting it with everybody. And it was crazy lifestyle, crazy world. So let's kind of keep going with it. Let's kind of go to, because we know that that upward trajectory for you with accomplishments and with the things that you were going with those
Mm-hmm.
reference points, we already kind of tracked those a little bit. So let's kind of get to the point where you were able to finally start divorcing those things, and how and when and why it happened.
Yeah. So um, when I became a Green Beret, when I passed selection and went through training and graduated and eventually showed up to a unit, I was that I would say was the culmination of like that phase of like accomplishments where I was like, this is now who I am because of what I've done. And um, again, it's a shallow self-esteem journey at that. So then came like the realization at that time after, doing that to then getting on a team and realizing that now you have to do this job every day, day in and day out. You do a hard job that takes a lot of work and a lot of time, and you're constantly gone. And it's just day to day, it's a grind. There's some really great times to it. And so I started to realize that day to day, it wasn't about the result being who you were. It was about that you had to live in like that culture. You had to internalize excellence. You couldn't just say, okay, today I'm gonna really do well. Next month I'll really set it on. You had to wake up every day with the understanding that you had to give your best and show up for the people around you and for the mission. And That's it's transformative when you do that for long enough, because it starts to become part of who you are, and your standards start to change. And then you kind of feel yourself kind of changing from those standards that you set for yourself, not for money, but for, something bigger than you that you can really appreciate. But even still, that's still some external validation, because it was like, okay, well, what do the guys on my team think about me? Is my career going as well as I want? Are they going to think that I'm a shitbag if I don't do as well on this test, or shoot that well, things like that. And once I deployed a couple times, it got to the point where, especially after I deployed to Afghanistan for about 6 months, and I could kind of sit there and think, when I had come back, about like, what's the point of all of it? It took a lot of like really purposeful introspection to be in the space where I'm at now, which is still, like, I may feel like I'm up here, but I'm not where I could be, but it took a lot of like purposeful thought, introspection, reading, like exploring how I thought about things and how I felt about things and why. And really, it took like a journey of kind of self understanding to think about what I thought was important and who I wanted to be. And, obviously, big shout out to Stephen Covey, but the habits of highly effective people was one of those first things where it was like, it wasn't so much that I needed to change my internal characteristics, because I felt like I had a pretty decent like bedrock foundation of what I thought was right and like my character. But it was about the map, like, where am I going, starting with the end in mind. And then also, is that the right map? Is that the right destination, based on like my values and what values I'd like to have? Because I mean, we can pick our values, I think, we can consciously say like, I want to be a good father who provides for my children, not only financially but emotionally. It's like, okay, well, how do I become the type of person who can do that? And it's a work in progress, but I try and cultivate patience and kindness and stuff like that. And it's the same thing. I want to be the type of person who is kind to the people around me when I don't have to be, or the type of person who doesn't let external forces kind of drive me this way and that. I want to be stable and be that person who other people can look at to be like, that's my rock, that's my guidepost. And I'm not there yet, but I think, it took a long time, it took years of just really understanding where I wanted to go and then devising ways to get there. It took a lot of failures, and it still does every day, all day. But, I think that's where that upswing came from, where I could say, okay, yeah, it's nice to get recognized for doing good things, but then it hurts to get recognized for doing bad things. But then the mature person realizes that I'm not those things. I'm not my accomplishments. I'm not a trophy. I am me. And at the end of the day, that's, really one of the only things that we have, is that pride of being true to yourself, and being stable in your values. And that's what I think, took a number of years to get there through self discovery.
So for me, with my upswing happened recently. Um, and I know we had spoke very sporadically.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I feel, and and damn, I feel like that you can attest to this. Um, the things that I talk about, the way that I approach things and the way that I think about things is like clearly different than it was about 4 years ago. My upswing happened very, very recently.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason it happened is because of people like Napoleon Hill, this guy right here, Og Mandino, and Covey. Because one of the reasons that I was going through the things I was going through at the time is because I had let go of that external validation, that need for external validation, this need for what other people were telling me that I needed to be, right? How you were saying, like, it feels good to get that validation, but it hurts to be like singled out and pointed out for doing the wrong things. Mm-hmm. So I let go of all of that shit because one of the things that I saw was that everything was centered on somebody else. Mm-hmm. Every single accomplishment I had was centered on how somebody else felt about it. It was never about like, okay, you did good and that's what's up. Like, you did a good thing and we, and that fits or whatever the case. It was always like that benefited me or it didn't benefit me. And if it didn't benefit me, it doesn't matter what you did. Like, you could pull the baddest looking female in the bar, but because it's not mine, you didn't do shit. And nobody gives a fuck about what you did. So I let go of all of that shit. I realized that a lot of the people I was around and a lot of people I was doing things for, they were draining me. So I had to let go of a lot of that shit. Mm-hmm. And then once I did that and I got into a new different type of lifestyle without actually changing my character or changing how I looked at self, and I ended up just being aimless. Napoleon Hill gave me aim. Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, he gave me the end destination. And the key that he gave me was not about doing the things that you thought you needed to do to get there, but about being the person that you needed to be to get there. Like, imagine yourself already in possession of all of these things. Imagine yourself already doing all of these things and then turning that mental camera back on yourself. What does that person look like? What does that person talk like? What do they act like? How do they interact with people? What are the things that they do on a daily basis? What does their thought process look like? All of that, right? And I said, you know what? It doesn't look like me. It doesn't look like me because I've shaped and molded myself around what other people wanted me to be. So I was able to say, okay, that was the start of the transformation. And then Covey, like you said, with the map, with the paradigms and how he calls it, the lenses, with how you look at everything, with the roles, with like, okay, so now that I look at that person is no longer like active. That person is no longer a drug dealer. That person is no longer somebody who doesn't care about everybody around him. That person is somebody who is, like you said, kind for no reason, kind without an agenda. That person is somebody who has purpose. That person is somebody who has confidence. That person is somebody who has a smile for everybody around them. That person is the type of person who teaches their cellmate how to read. And Covey is the one who said, okay, now that you know what that person looks like, from whatever source you got it from, now you need to take that person and you need to fit everything that you do into what that person would do. And then further with Og Mandino and further with Tony Robbins, like how you were saying that you were forced to internalize excellence every single day. It's with the same thing when you're going through this transformation. It's like you have to wake up every day and you have to realize that you can be that person. And not only a little bit of that person, not kind of that person, not sometimes that person, but you are that person every second, every minute, and every hour of that day. And then basically you just got to kind of fake it till you make it. You got to be that, or just do that. Do what that person would do, regardless of how you feel about it. That person works out. You're achy, okay, we still work out. You don't want to wake up at 4:30 to get a quick workout in? It doesn't matter. That's what we do now. That's what I told my mind until my mind started looking at my new self like, okay, I see where you are. I see where you are now. I'm not going to argue these points no more because that's not you. Now my mind actually argues against when I feel those lazy thoughts. My mind is like, nah, that's not what you do. And the thing about And how that comes back to self-image, self-esteem, and concept, self-confidence, is because when you derive it from that inner, from what the things that you, the places that you want to go, and even if you haven't achieved it yet, just the fact that you're stepping towards it every single day, something as little as making the bed every morning,
Mm-hmm.
not only doesn't necessarily ignite that huge fire of motivation, but having that discipline ignites, and it sets you aglow with that self-confidence,
Mm-hmm.
that self-esteem, that self-image, because it's like nobody's going to tell you, hey man, good job, you made your bed. But you're going to look at the bed every time you walk past it and be like, yeah, I did that this morning.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to look at your sweaty workout clothes and be like, yeah, I did that this morning. You're going to look at your toothbrush, it's still wet because you used it this morning. Okay, yeah, I did that this morning. And then you're going to start to look at the other things and you're going to say, like, okay, like for me, for instance, I want to start writing stuff. I'm getting into this stuff. May not be the best quality, may not be perfect, but I did that. I can go
Mm-hmm.
look at my social media, my YouTube. I did that. I can look at these books I've been reading, the ones that you told me to read. I did that.
Mm-hmm.
And that starts to get into my self image and self esteem, and it starts to boost it. It starts to prop it up on stuff that is not related to how other people feel. And I think that just kind of goes along with that too. You said you internalized excellence, but then it still became about what other people
Mm-hmm.
wanted. But now you still have that same attitude for the things that you want.
Yeah.
And the difference in how you feel about yourself is like night and day. Even though you were doing some, what do they call it in the army, like high speed shit?
That's what they say.
You were doing all of that. But now the stuff that you're doing is for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes you feel just that much better. And so now we're going to talk about some stuff for other people, anybody who might be watching this. We're going to talk about some tips. We're going to talk about tips for building self-esteem and self-confidence. And we're going to talk about the impact of social media. And we're going to talk about how to navigate that and still retain your self-image. So what's some practical advice that I would say that you could give, like maybe one or two personal habits or practices that you use that have effectively boosted your self-esteem and self-confidence?
I mean, this one I think is obvious, and I think you touched on it, but also coming from like being a medical professional, you got to exercise. Like that should be the bedrock of almost what anybody does, because it's not about just looking good. It's not about just getting good race times or big muscles and stuff like that, and like shameless plug for health, but it's not about just being a healthy person, but it's about that discipline, and it's about not breaking the chain, right? It's about something that you can do for yourself, and that even if you don't necessarily enjoy every second of it, it's something that you're taking practical steps to do better. And from a shallow point of view, I mean, there's a ton of benefits. You feel better, you look better, and that can quickly boost self esteem. But then, like you said, as you develop habits, and working out is just an easy one because it's also a very productive, good habit. But it's one of those things where you do it and you get good at it and you continue doing it so you can look back and say, I did it. I've maintained that habit. It's become who I am, and I can stay true to now who I am. That's, probably the first tip I'd give would just be regular exercise. And then also, it's been shown to just make people happier. It's been shown to obviously make people live longer, boost mood, prevent disease. So, and exercise doesn't have to be weightlifting, running, things of that nature. It could be walking, could be yoga, could be things that people enjoy, playing sports. Um, I think the other thing is, this one's going to be a little bit kind of hard to explain, but I'm a big fan of thinking, and I know that's like, yeah, of course. Why wouldn't you be? But what I mean by that is sometimes, it's good to just develop a time or a practice to just write out a couple of things that you are dealing with, whether they're problems, goals, issues, current events, and just kind of sit there and see what your thoughts are and flesh them out. You know, it's kind of like journaling, but maybe I'm just too lazy to actually write it down. But I sit there and I think, okay, how do I feel about this? Can I explain it to myself in my own head? Can I figure out a way to make this work? Can I figure out if this is something that I think is important to me or should be? You know, it's a little bit different than meditation because I think, you know, meditation, you want to be still, you want to be empty, but like it's actually Albert Einstein used to have a practice of just, you know, almost getting in a dreamlike state and just having deep thoughts and working through things in his head. And I think that leads to self discovery where you can say, like, okay, this is what I think about this. This is what I think about, you know, success. And for some people, it helps to write those things down. But I think you get to a point where, as you get more sure about yourself and more self confident, that you begin to trust some of the things that you're figuring out. You know, and it's less of like I need a guidebook to say I need to do this, I need to do that, I need to do this. And get to that point where you're like, I am doing that, and that just is who I am. Now let me take a little, you know, self-analysis and say, okay, am I doing it right? Is there anything I could be doing better? Am I doing the right things? So if I were to share just those two tips, you know, like just solid exercise, but also just a habit of some sort, and you know, just like deep problem solving, thinking, journaling, a way to just kind of figure those things out.
So yeah, I definitely agree. For me, it was the exercise that really sparked, um, like the way that I look at myself differently. Even though not there with it yet physically all the way. However, I'm not that same. I don't look the same. I don't feel the same. Three steps used to be my, arch enemy. You know, we meet again. I know I'm gonna be fucking huffing and puffing by the time I get up the front porch type shit. But I no longer have that. And the just even if I do something light, I still did something
Yeah.
just because that's what we do. And like how you said, you start to get to the point where you trust yourself because at the beginning, and that's even where I came up with the concept of the free hour because like I had to force all of these new habits down my own throat.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to literally like set aside time, like okay, every day. And I was in jail, it was during COVID. So they would pop our door for an hour a day. So it's like, okay, I'm gonna shove this instead of just walking around or watching TV or whatever the case. I'm going to force myself to work out and do like some intense ass burpees for 20, 30 minutes. I'm going to force myself to get on the phone and socialize with someone every single day to improve my emotional connection with people. I'm going to force myself to go interact with somebody on a spiritual level. I'm going to go force myself to read a snippet of a book for 10, 20 minutes before they finally let us in. And make it to the shower real quick for the last 5 minutes of it. And one of the things that I have found when I was actually able to start doing these things, I had to write it down.
Mm.
That's what really helped me with thinking, and Thinking Grow Rich sparked it for me because it said, think about where you want to go, think about what that person looks like, right? Think about, and basically with Thinking Grow Rich, it actually has like a specific amount of money that you want by a specific day and a specific thing or things that you're going to do in return for the money. And it says, no, you don't just think about it, write that shit down.
Mm.
Write it down so you can look at it. And you can look at it twice a day until it's memorized because that'll be the last thing you see before you go to sleep. It'll be the first thing you see when you wake up. And what happens is, like how you said, you start to begin to trust yourself like I am doing. Instead of I'm going to do, I'm going to chase, I'm going to achieve, I am achieving. I am chasing, I am working towards, I am pursuing. So then you don't have to worry necessarily about writing everything down. But the problem is that a lot of us are so stuck in negativity. We're so steeped in negativity that that journaling shit is super important for self-esteem because you have to get it out. And whether you want to do it in the thinking way, whether you want to actually write it down, whether you even want to take a voice note, you just got to get that shit out and let it go. It helps to learn to accept things for the way they are.
Mm-hmm.
So and then I'm gonna go a step further because I don't want to just have the same two that you got. We're reading.
Yeah.
Reading books, like they say self-help, even though it's somebody else kind of helping you, but there's somebody else kind of helping you learn how to help yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And these books to me are super important because one of the best ways that human beings learn is through failure. But one of an even better way to learn is to learn through the failures of other people.
Mm-hmm.
They say that knowledge is to learn from your own mistakes, wisdom is to learn from the mistakes of others. And there's so many pages of the mistakes of others. There's so many pages of the things that other people have learned in all of these books, and they help you to navigate. They help you to start. They help give you guideposts through really what is a storm. Because when you look at it, especially for males, finding out who you are, especially nowadays, and this is where we're going to get into social media, it's a fog.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know who you are without somebody telling you that what you did was good. You don't know who you are without somebody else telling you that your achievements are in line with what they want.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things, and we're going to talk to you how you divorce yourself from the social media, because if you are, and especially people who grew up with social media, because social media didn't come around for us until what, like I was 21, Facebook became a thing.
MySpace in high school.
MySpace in high school. We had AIM, AOL Instant Messenger, but you had to like talk to the person in real life to get that from them. Like if a girl didn't want to give you her number, she gave you her AIM. That was like her screening process, right? Now would she just give you her Instagram or her Snap instead of her number or whatever the case? But that it was the same thing back then. And so if you have grown up with social media, you have probably been inundated with all of these things that you have to do to be, especially for men, to be a man.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even about who you are or what you have to be anymore. It's what you have, what you've got, and what you've done. And how, as men, especially young men, and this is probably going to be a little bit deeper of a question even than the stuff we talked about before, but how do you get to that point where you can say, regardless of what I've done, regardless of who I've pleased today, I'm still a man? How do you get to that knowing that you're like you have thousands of signals telling you the exact opposite every single day?
Yeah, that is a deep question, but I think, it starts with first, I would probably put it in some steps, but like first, understanding that social media isn't real. Like, and you have kids growing up who that's what they've grown up with, and I think it's the same where like, we've been told when we were growing up that you don't trust everything you see on the internet, and then probably the same with the television generation that they're seeing these things, and that's the way they think life is supposed to be, and it's not. And then the other thing with social media is that at least if it's a television show, you would have to have waited each week to get that new content, that new like fresh stuff. But now it's instant, it's everywhere, and there's no limits to stopping. You can scroll forever, you can constantly find new things, and you can constantly find things that are showing you that you're not doing good enough. And it's a platitude, something that people just say, but social media shows you people's best days. Like, it's always vacations. It's never, hey, sat on the couch today. didn't do shit, didn't
Yeah.
do anything. It's always went to Bora Bora, look at my new car. And then if you follow 100 people and those 100 people are portraying this image of an incredibly successful person, each one has the new car. You're not just looking at one person's best day. You're looking at 100 people's best day every day. And you combine that with Photoshop and just straight up lies, it's hard to keep things straight. So I think step one is realizing that like these things for the most part don't exist in the way that you would think they do. So with that, it's like, okay, it's smoke and mirrors, it's makeup, it's fake. Then you can start to think,
Real quick though,
yeah,
also the difference between TV and like social media is that TV or shows that you watch on those streaming services, they're obviously scripted, right? They're
mm,
obvious. It's an obvious production. It's obvious storytelling. It's obviously not like this is not reality. It's very obvious. But when you're watching somebody like in a situation like this, where there just is a camera and two people talking,
mm,
or even like if you're watching somebody on TikTok and they just have the camera right here and they're talking to the camera, it's still harder to like separate that, or it's harder to look at that in the same light as TV.
yeah,
Like this is still just for your entertainment.
yeah,
Like this person is taking the wildest thought that they had that day, airing it out there so that other people will engage with it.
mm-hmm,
Because if you
yeah,
just say like, "Hey, I was kind of hungry, so I stopped at McDonald's. I
yeah.
probably shouldn't have done that," you're not going to get a
Yeah,
million likes on it.
you're not gonna get the
You're
engagement,
not
like you
going to get
said.
the engagement. But if you say, I had this new radical idea about gender relationships, and a lot of people ain't going to like it,
Yeah,
especially the opposite one, you'll get a million people saying, you know what, you're right. Not realizing that this is not how people actually
yeah. It's
are
not real
every
life.
day. It's not real life.
Hmm.
So, my bad for interrupting,
No,
but go
no,
ahead
it's
and
good.
continue.
It's funny because I was thinking, who had some pretty good ideas? No, I'm just kidding. I won't go into there. Anyway, Kanye West.
Yeah.
No, all right. So, but yeah, so like I think number one is like you realize like, and it's easier when you weren't raised like that. You can you're from the outside looking in. When I never really got into the participation factor. I like looking at Instagram, but like it's the same thing. Like every dude is super jacked. Every person is awesome at what they do because if they weren't, I wouldn't have found them
Yeah.
unless they're in your circle of friends. And even still, if you're looking at your circle of friends, like they're posting their accomplishments. So getting stuck in that trap of looking for validation through pictures, you know, it's it's uh, it's something that I think people who are looking for validation do. Or if they're not looking for validation or some sort of combination, they're looking for, monetary compensation. They're doing it because they're looking for ads. They're looking for, something from it. So
And that's something to remember too. Like people who are saying shit that, and unfortunately, a lot of the shit that has been said that is actually like very divisive, right?
mm-hmm,
Because it wasn't that big when I got locked up. I was only down for 2.5, almost 3 years, and I come out and everything is just super fucking divisive. But you know what? That they get paid to say that shit.
yeah,
They're not necessarily like, yeah, this is everything and I feel all the time and I always feel this way. They just know that this is what they're getting paid for. And it's the same shit with scripted TV shows. They discard 100 script ideas before they get to that one that they're actually going to go with for the episode.
mm-hmm,
And it's the same with that one person because that person is like, yeah, I don't think they're going to, if I put up something that I'm mediocre at, or if we have a conversation that isn't super insightful, like, oh, we just have to scrap that whole video. That's what these people are doing. They just have that time on their hands to
mm-hmm,
really find that one gem or find that diamond in the rough or find that one time out of a million that they tried to do this little activity or whatever the case, that they did it well. And I think that people are falling into that trap of saying like, oh no, like that person just overnight just got this big, and because I don't have the six pack, I'm not a man.
yeah, yeah, and hard part is like, the other part of that is, first off, like if you're getting your advice from like just straight up social media from a guy taking a picture of a car, maybe check your sources. But then also, the second part of what you asked is, how can people who are inundated with content and stuff like that, how can they figure out how they're supposed to be, men in particular? And the question is like, well, I mean, like what what is being a man? Like, how do people define that? And some people, it's easy to get swept away in like groupthink and into different movements and things like that, especially if you don't have a strong anchor of like self belief, of character, of who you are. Then it's easy to, again, we give ourselves over to these things that make sense. And it may be, for those parts of your life, things make sense because you're sad, because you're angry, because you feel slighted. And again, that's, I think the crux of all this is that we're talking about the self. You're giving away your power to somebody else, where your power is in yourself. When you take responsibility, when you realize that the only thing you truly have control over is yourself, then that gives you a firm grounding. And you can then, take or leave these various pieces of advice and these things, and maybe you're wrong, but it also gives you that strength because you know who you are. You don't have to be right all the time. You don't have to, if I'm wrong, what will they think of me? Well, it doesn't matter because that's them. I value, being better. I value the things I value and I want to get there. So you can say, I was wrong. I should do something else. I don't like that everybody else likes. I like this. Or, even if, I mean, it could go the wrong way and be like, I like that thing that's real bad. And you're like,
Yeah,
oh,
that definitely
God,
could go the
don't
wrong
do
way.
that. Yeah. But still, like, you're still being true to yourself. And it is hard because, like, a lot of stuff does get marketed, though, on social media as self help. And self help, you know, if you don't need self help, you probably won't buy into it because, like inherently, if you don't need help,
You're
you're
not,
good.
yeah,
But self help, is very effective for some of the most vulnerable people. And those vulnerable people, they may get swept away into the wrong things, especially if their self esteem is low. And then the paradigm is looking towards the outside. What's wrong with the world?
right,
What's wrong with this culture? As opposed to, how can I make myself better?
right. And so to kind of further go on that is how you said like a lot of these people are vulnerable. One of the things I see a lot now, especially on social media, is like you are whatever if,
Mm,
and I think to be able to divorce yourself from that type of stuff, that type of outlook, that type of superficial view of manhood, even womanhood, whatever the case, you have to remove the conditions because social media is going to have you jumping through so many fucking hoops.
yeah.
And guess what? Tomorrow it's going to be a brand new hoop. You're never going to be able to actually get to that finish line. It's a moving target
Mm-hmm.
that you can literally never hit. And so that's how I think you divorce yourself from it. Remove the if.
Yeah.
Instead of saying you're a man if you do, just remove the if. You're a man. You do blah, 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 blah. You do what you like. You do what your purpose is. You do the things that you want to do with your life. That doesn't detract from, that doesn't even add, but unfortunately, it doesn't add to either.
Yeah.
It's just what you are, what you are.
Yeah.
And you like the things you like and you do the things that you do. And then you don't have to, and then when you're rock solid in that, you don't have to listen to people saying, like, oh, well, you ain't this. You ain't that. You ain't
Yeah.
shit. You ain't you ain't a man, you're not this, you're not a scholar, you're not whatever the case, you ain't shit, whatever the case, right? You're not a gangster, you're not none of that. You don't have to listen to that validation because you have that very firm foundation, and the
Mm-hmm.
foundation is just basically going back to self, the beginning of it. You are, I am. Remove the if,
Mm-hmm.
because social media adds that if. It's like, I'm a man if I got a gang of women. I'm a man if I have a whole bunch of money. I'm a man if I'm doing these things or I'm doing those things, or if I'm very successful or I'm super talented at these other things. I'm a man if. Remove the if. Remove that if and just say that no, I'm a man.
Yeah.
And even if you're growing into being a man, if you're younger, you can say, I am becoming a man. And that does not depend upon these conditions that culture is trying to tell you about what it is. And the same thing with womanhood. The same thing with being a woman. Like, I am a woman or I am becoming a woman. You don't have to follow the conditions. You don't have to follow what other people tell you because, and here's the thing about it, right? Depending on how you arrange the words in the search, right? You can search for the exact same thing, worded a little bit differently, and you'll find the exact opposite
Yeah.
on both ends of that spectrum from people who look exactly the same or sound
Mm-hmm.
exactly the same. It'll be basically like this, like him and his twin telling you the exact opposite shit,
It's probably the same guy.
and it might be the same dude. Just knowing he puts different hashtags, so one side can't find him.
Hashtag feminism.
Yeah, hashtag feminism on one, and then hashtag red pill on the other,
Yeah.
and saying the exact opposite shit. And then guess what? He's getting paid off of both of
Oh
those
yeah.
because he's putting those ifs on everybody, and that if keeps you down because that if relies upon accomplishments, it relies upon validation, it relies upon what other people tell you. Now, if you have your own ifs, that's
Mm-hmm.
different. If you got your own personal beliefs, if you got your own bigger yes inside of you, that isn't if, like I am achieving if I do this or if I do that, that's different. But if your
Yeah.
ifs come from what everybody else is doing, like how people say, like, you don't work out if you can't bench 2 and a quarter, or if you can't squat 300 or 404 something whatever, then I
Mm-hmm.
don't work out because I can bench that, but I can't squat that. My knees are blown out. But like, if I put those ifs that I see on social media, I wouldn't even consider myself someone who works out.
Yeah.
So
And it's good to have goals. Like it's good to say like I want to do this. Or what would be nice is like, hey, okay, that seems like a good goal, like this condition for being like, okay, I would like to be at this level by this amount of time. And maybe you get some of those goals from outside sources. But again, that's the difference between achievements and identity. It's like I'll be strong if like yeah, you're not going to go to the gym and be like I'm strong because I'm strong in here and then you try and bench and you kill yourself.
yeah,
But it's not like I'm a valuable person because I can bench 225. Like that's a little bit ridiculous. And I think, that's tangentially related is like the same talk about where people talk about like being alpha or sigma or things like that. I mean, at the end of the day, it is all just labels and qualifiers. Like, well, it's the same thing we used to do as a kid. We used to call people names if they were things we didn't like. But now there's people with huge forums that can say this is what being alpha is, and you're like, according to who? This is what being beta is, according to who? And there is obviously a little bit where it's like, yeah, according to culture, and you're like, yeah, culture can be wrong, culture can be mean and like unforgiving and not rooted in like dignity. um but it's so funny, like you mentioned some of those stories. Like there's a video I was watching on TikTok a little while ago, and it's these couple of comedians, and they're reacting to like success coach type people. And one of the dudes is like, you're a beta if you walk a dog, if you're going to go outside, you got a dog on a leash and you're letting that dog pull you around, you're a beta. And so like they saw the video, they're like, yeah, you're a piece of shit. If you got a dog and you take care of it, like, how dare you? We should all just kill our dogs. They're like, where does it end?
Yeah.
There's another TikTok I saw too where it's like this dude, he just goes through all the TikToks and he looks for ick videos where the girl's like, you know what gives me the ick? It's called the Big Book of Icks.
And that's like 700 things
Yeah,
on the list.
and imagine trying to live your life according to all 700 of those things. But again, that's the ridiculousness, but we can look at that and we can be like, obviously ridiculous. But then we look at, well, you're not alpha if you don't bench 225. And some people don't see the same ridiculousness.
Yeah. And it's because
it's hard.
It's because I think that like it goes back to like even with us talking, it's two dudes. We're at a kitchen table. You know, my mom's came in and all that stuff. Like we're two brothers. We're kicking it. I'm on vacation, right? This is like not fully scripted, but it's kind of scripted. Like I have talking points that I'm like leading the conversation because we had a topic that I wanted to talk about, right? And I even show it to you. Boom. I have that. People, the veneer of, because it's on social media and because it's on certain platforms, that makes it so real and so authentic. Like this person is really speaking from their heart. And I think that that's the difference. Because when you even have like the success coaches and the motivational speakers and like even I had it one time because I put up clips of all of my videos and shit. Somebody went on there, it's like, man, you just be talking in circles. Like, yeah, it was a 30-second clip.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, and
it's quick bites.
It's a quick bite or whatever the case. But then also like that wasn't me just like necessarily just being oh so real and speaking from the heart. And so when we see these dudes and they're so in front of the camera and it's just them, we just think like, man, that guy is so real. He's just being authentic. He's just being him. He's just saying some shit.
Yeah.
Like I think that we need to, especially as men, like because when we was in high school, right, there would always be that dude be like, oh yeah, I mess with that girl over there. And you just immediately, you would know like, that's cap. That's cap. Yeah. Like he didn't do that.
But I know a guy who did.
That's
no,
also cap. No, you don't. Like, okay, well, yeah, her boyfriend, that's cap, right? Or, you know, in my case, in my lifestyle, oh yeah, I went and did this and I was riding around with the 30 thing and I smoked these dudes with cap. Cap. You did not do that. You did not do that. But when we got this dude and he gets in front of the camera and he says all these things with such conviction and such like what bravado or whatever the case, and it's like he's attractive dude and he has all these girls or whatever the case, all these people are commenting on it. We just like assume that that's authentic and real. We assume that because he has the following in the forum that somehow somewhere along the way he has been vetted.
He must be right.
He must be right. Like a million people follow this dude. He must be right. So you know what? Fuck that dog. I'll never take that dog for a walk
ever
again. You know what?
I actually threw away my dog.
If that dog wants to go out for a walk, it better go out by its fucking self. Yeah. Or matter of fact, I'm on the leash, so I can lead the fucking dog.
I let the dog walk me.
I let the dog walk me.
It's really weird.
And
my neighbors don't like it.
And we're not like sitting back and taking a second and being like, you know what, that's cap.
Yeah, that's a weird thing to say.
Like that's some dumbass shit. And that's some bullshit. Like, yeah, if you got a dog, you're a beta. You got bit by a dog when you were a kid. We don't do that no more.
Yeah.
We just take everything for face value. Like that's what it is. That's the truth. He's really right. He's really speaking from the heart. No, the dude got bit by a dog when he was a kid, and now he doesn't like fucking Yorkies
or something. Or he's just probably just like coming up with the wildest shit that he can say, so that people will be like, whoa,
he's a sick.
Dude, check this out. Yeah, this guy knows.
He knows. Dude, check out what this guy said, man. Fuck that dog. If your girl has a dog, bro, she's trying to fucking make you into a beta.
He works for the dog catcher.
So it's like, yeah, he works for the dog catcher.
It's like, wait a second.
He's trying to take a vacation. So, but it's like we don't do that no more. We don't like take the step back and be like, you know what, that's cap. Or like we see all these dudes go on TikTok and they go on these rants about their relationships, or they go on these rants about women, or even on the flip side, these women who go on these rants about dudes, or they talk about like the things that they saw, the ick list or whatever, and we're just like, yeah, that's cap.
Yeah.
Like that's cap. You thought that was funny,
Yeah.
and so you went and posted it, and now everybody's actually believing like, oh my god, like you know what? If a guy does that, that is like that, or if a girl does that, she is a hoe. Like, oh, it's a red. If she likes to go roller skating, red flag.
That's gross.
She's a hoe.
That's gross.
Like, and we're just like, you know what? You're right.
Yeah.
Instead of being like, you know what, this cap, bro. You like roller skating. And you want all the girls to yourself.
They work at the roller rink.
They work
at the roller blading rink. So like roller skating, they have to destroy it.
Yeah.
But I think that's true. Like a lot of this stuff, it's supposed to be entertainment. Like it's like wrestling. Like we don't think the Undertaker's literally coming back from the dead.
Whoa.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe, but he
he
doesn't walk dogs, so that's
he doesn't walk dogs.
But like you look at that, you're like, yeah, I don't literally think that's true, but it's entertaining. It's just like the same thing. Like stand-up comedians, like they're creating these stories. Maybe there's a kernel of truth in them, and they make it funny. They make you watch them. They make it interesting. And the popular people in any facet of something where they're talking to people, I think they do the same thing. There's probably a little bit of something there that, you know, people get, but they have a way of making it interesting or controversial. But then when we look at that as like, that's the fact book, that's trouble.
Yeah. And see, and then tying it all back into self, you know, we look at these people who are super charismatic. We look at these people who always kind of knew the right things to say to people.
Mm-hmm.
And like, you know, we've all had people in our lives like that. I've had friends like that. I'm not necessarily one of those people. I haven't always been one of those people. I know now there's some stuff that I could say that could possibly help somebody, you know, kind of get onto the right path, because I've done that before now, right? And I've said things to people. But the thing is, like, I've never been the type of person who can influence or convince somebody to do something that they weren't necessarily already thinking about. Like, yeah, I can help you. I can pressure you into doing some shit you was already going to do. Like, I can be the straw that broke the camel's back or the tipping point. But a lot of these people are the person who are very good at, and they've always been good at, putting those ideas into other people's heads. Whether they're just doing it because they know, like, hey, you know what? This would be a great way to make money. Which is a lot of what people do, because being an influencer, doing social media, doing YouTube, it's a paying gig.
Yeah.
And you have to do what works, right? And then that's one of the ways that they do it. And some of the times they just completely make the shit up because they think it's going to be funny. A lot of these times people are not necessarily sharing like absolute 100% truth, real stories. And then we look at a lot of the guys that we try to emulate. And these guys, I see a lot of these guys now, and they're just talking about like how they do the things that they do or say to women, you know, the type of lifestyles they live. And I'm looking at them and I'm like, it's cap. Like, even these dudes that have this money like that, and it's like, yeah, I know girls who will do it, but they're not like, they ain't shit. They really ain't shit. And that's why they fucking miserable. And it's like, we look at, oh man, this dude's shit. He got everything I want. He got all of this other shit. He doesn't really have that. He doesn't actually have that. And, you know, and I just think that's the best way to help divorce it, is just remember, and I think you said it perfectly, it's like wrestling. Like, it's not sports, it's sports entertainment. Like, they're not really like doing all of this shit or competing to win. Like, they are doing like some of this shit. They are failing some of the time, or they are learning some of the things, or they are giving you some of the advice. They're not telling you everything right off the bat because they know that you'll never need them again. It's like that when I was telling when I was teaching my cellmate how to read, I was teaching him literally everything that I had ever learned. So you know why?
Just a couple of the letters.
Yeah, just a couple of letters. I just told him A through like G. So that way,
$20 if you want the rest.
yeah, if you want the rest, like you got to come back. You know, I need that. I need your subscription.
Yeah,
You know,
$9.99 a month.
yeah, I need that. But no, I told him everything I know from jump, so that way he would literally never need me again.
Mm-hmm.
That's the difference, I think, because there are people out there who are going to give you literally everything, knowing that it could possibly risk you never needing them again.
Mm-hmm.
Or they could give you the little bit. They could give you that snippet. They could give you that little tidbit. They could give you those ifs. Because once the ifs change, they know you're going to need them again.
Mm-hmm.
They know you're going to be right back to them when those ifs change, because it's like, okay, I heard 10 people talking about this is what they want out of a person or out of a man or out of a relationship. Okay, so if you're a real man, you're this, and this.
Mm-hmm.
And then 3 weeks later, when all of those things change, or when these new people are going viral, or they're the people who are showing up on your For You page, now I know that this guy is going to be like, damn, I'm confused. What happened? He's going to come crawling right back to me and put more money into my whatever the fuck.
He's probably also going to say, you're not a man if you don't do this. And then that kid is going to be like, well, okay, how do I do that? Well, to teach you that, here's my course. Like, you know.
Comment course and I'll teach you how to do that.
And I'll just wrap it all up.
Comment course and I'll teach you how to eat spaghetti with a fork.
That's beta.
Oh yeah, that's beta. You got to eat with a spoon.
Yeah, I only eat it with a knife. Personally.
Yeah,
I only walk my dogs with a knife. That's me. Speaking of money, though, I think this is a good time to shout out my Patreon. It's 420 YOLO, 360 no scope.
Oh shit.
.AOL.
AOL.
Yeah. Messenger.
Definitely aged both.
So there's some money there.
So yeah, man. So look, I think this has been a great conversation about self. 3-hour ABCs. We talked about self. We talked about self-image. We talked about self-esteem. We talked about self-concept. I want to thank you once again, man. Thank my brother for coming on, Alex Turner. If he wants me to, I'll put any of his stuff in the description. I don't know if he will or not, but if you like this stuff, let me know. I'll try to get him on more often. Share your thoughts with me. Share the video with other people. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and check me out again. Deuces.
Yeah. See ya. And if you want the rest of the letters.
You got
$9.99 per month.
Comment course and I'll teach you the rest of the letters.